Hello and welcome back. I took a long break off for the holidays because this YouTube thing is new to me and I didn't want to put my phone in people's faces when I went home for Christmas and asked them to be in my videos, so I just didn't. So Happy New Year, we're in 2020, we're back, and I'm filming a video all about how I studied for the MCAT while I was working full time and how you should do not what I did. So we'll get started. So if I can figure out how to do it, I'm gonna put my score in the screen here so that you can see that I'm not lying to you. So I got a 513 on my MCAT, which is in the 88th percentile, which I thought was pretty good for working full time, not having all day every day for weeks on end to study. The materials I used were the Kaplan 7-book set and all of the AAMC digital question banks and full-length practice tests. That's all that I used to study, and it really worked for me in the end. So I took my MCAT when I was out of college because I had so much going on in college that I didn't think I would be successful if I took the MCAT while I was still in school. I was working a night job and I had all of my normal classes and I just could not make time to study the way I thought I needed to properly study. So I just decided that I was going to take my MCAT once I got out of school. But what happened was I work a full-time job and it was a little bit difficult to schedule time to study while I was working a full-time job, but I figured it out and I'm gonna tell you how I did it. The most important thing when trying to study for your MCAT, whether or not you're in school or out of school, is time management. You need to schedule out your day and stick to it. Figure out what you're gonna do from this time to this time, this time to this time, all day, so you make sure you get all the stuff done that you need to. And you need to stick to your schedule. It's really easy to write out a schedule and then decide, oh, I'm gonna spend 5 more minutes doing this, or I'm gonna take this break here, even though it's not scheduled in, and then you totally get off your schedule. It's really easy to bomb your schedule, so you really need to be able to stick to it. But something else that's really important is if something happens and you're not able to stick to your schedule that day, forgive yourself for not being able to do it, because stuff's out of your control. Things are gonna happen. It's not gonna work out every single day. So forgive yourself for not being able to stick to your schedule sometimes, but be sure to get yourself back on schedule so you don't throw yourself off for the rest of your study period. You also need to make sure that you have tangible goals. You don't want to make a goal for yourself that's wildly unreasonable and not be able to reach it, and then bum yourself out for not being able to reach it and become really unmotivated to study anymore because you didn't reach your goal. You need to make sure that you have reasonable goals that you're able to achieve, and if you are not able to achieve that goal that day, make sure whatever's left over is going to be able to be accomplished in the next day. So you need to make sure that you have an environment in which you can study really well. I recommend having somewhere quiet where you can put on headphones and play non-lyrical music if that helps you study, just somewhere where you're not going to be interrupted. If you are in college, it's really helpful to go to the non-talking parts of the library to study, or if you're like me and you're working full-time, make sure that when you go home you have a space that's your own space where you're not going to be interrupted for however much time on end that you need to get good studying in. So at the time that I was studying for the MCAT, I lived alone and I have a little desk set up that was really calming. I had a candle, all of my stuff spread out in a way that I was able to see everything clearly. And that really helped me be able to focus for long periods of time because I was not being interrupted and I had an environment that was really calming and made it easier for me to focus on what I was doing. So one of the things that I struggled with when I was studying was ADHD. So I was diagnosed with ADHD, and what was really difficult for me at the time was getting distracted, like having my phone nearby and wanting to look at my phone, or trying to study or read and thinking about literally anything else that I could possibly think about that wasn't the MCAT. And I was having this issue where I was reading the same paragraph over and over again. I couldn't get anything done because I was just getting so distracted. And what ended up working for me was studying for 25 minutes straight. And then after that 25 minutes, taking a 10-minute break no matter what. Like if I was in the middle of a problem or something and my alarm went off, I was going to take a break. And that made it easier for me to be like, okay, I'm only gonna focus for 25 minutes. That's something that my brain can handle. And I know at the end of 25 minutes that I'm going to be able to take a break and do what I need and give my brain a break so that I can come back for my next 25 minutes and study really hard. So that's something that really worked out for me. And I know there are some apps that you can do that with where I can't remember what it's called, but you can like grow a little tree so that you don't access your phone. And if you access your phone, the tree dies. It gives you an incentive to not use your phone while you're studying. That really helped with my inability to stay focused. And it's really helpful if your phone or anything that can distract you is in a different room so that you are obligated to stay at your seat and study without having your phone within reach. Sorry if the angle's different, I had to answer a work call, so we're back. So, what I think is the most important resource for you when you're studying for the MCAT is to make sure that you use test-like questions and full-length practice tests. Half of it is knowing the material and understanding it, and the other half is trying to understand what they're trying to ask you for. Because a lot of the questions aren't very straightforward, and you have to really think about what they're truly asking you for. They're gonna write the questions in just a slightly weird way that makes you first think that they're asking for something, and then as you understand it a little bit more and think about it, you realize that they're asking for something else. So understanding how to read and understand the questions that they ask you is a big deal. So you really need to use questions and practice tests that are like the MCAT. And the MCAT has a bunch of different tools that you can use, like highlighting and strike through and stuff like that. And you really need to be able to be comfortable with those before taking the real exam so that nothing surprises you when you get to the testing center. What I recommend for this is using the AAMC materials that they offer online. It's a little bit pricey, but they give you thousands of questions. You have question banks and, section banks and a bunch of different practice questions that are structured just like the actual exam, and you have available to you the tools that they use on the actual exam. And the AAMC also offers 4 full-length practice tests in that digital set, which I highly recommend. The test is like 8 hours long, and you need to practice that sort of endurance because you don't want to have only practice taking the test for like an hour or two and then have to all of a sudden take an 8-hour test and you're not able to stay focused that long. So it's really important that you take full-length practice tests and get yourself trained to be on your A game and thinking for that long of a period of time. So what I did is I had 3 practice tests at that point. This was before the AAMC added the 4th one. For the 3 Saturdays leading up to the actual exam, I would get up at 6 or 7 or whenever I was gonna get up for the real test, drive to a different location and take the full test at that location as if I were taking it for the real thing. So I got used to every Saturday getting up early and preparing for a test and then going and taking it. So when I went to go take the real test, it wasn't new to me. I was used to getting up early and I was used to taking a test for 8 hours. So that is something that was hugely helpful when I took the exam. Something that Cole used that he really stands by is UWorld. They have a ton of questions that are very test-like, and UWorld has really good explanations for their answers. Sometimes with the AAMC stuff or even Kaplan questions, when they give you an explanation for why an answer's right, it might not make a whole lot of sense. And there were a couple instances where we were like, they just repeated the answer, they didn't explain the answer. So something great with UWorld, which I didn't use, is that they have really, really good explanations for why the answer is the correct answer so that you actually learn from answers that you get wrong. And that brings up a really good point with how to take questions that you get wrong and use them as a learning opportunity rather than getting upset with yourself. So you need to look at each wrong answer as, okay, what can I learn from this situation? Why is the correct answer actually the correct answer? And it'll become a learning opportunity rather than you getting upset with yourself for getting stuff wrong. I'm pretty sure very few people can start studying and be able to get most questions right, especially with kind of the tricky way that the MCAT words their questions. So this is something that I did, was I would take every wrong question and I would feel like, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm not good enough to take this test. I'm not smart enough to take this test. And it really brought me down and made it really difficult for me to focus. And once I switched my mindset to using the wrong answers or the questions I got wrong as a learning opportunity to not make the same mistake again, it became much, much easier for me to actually focus and to not lose my motivation when I got questions wrong. Like, it always sucks to go through a question bank and see, you know, all those red X's, but each of those questions that you got wrong is a learning opportunity to not make the same mistake again. The last thing that really helped me was for the psych social section. There are just a ton of terms that you're not gonna know, and it's really helpful just to rote memorize a lot of the terms that they're gonna use in that section. So what I did was I went onto Quizlet and I found a flashcard set that had all of the terms that you might be able to see in this section of the MCAT. And it was something like 800 terms or something crazy like that. And so what I did was I went through every single flashcard, and if I knew what the term meant, I didn't write it down because I knew it already. But for terms that I didn't know, I would write them down and I would write out the meaning of the term. And I had this list, probably like one sheet of paper front and back, of terms that I didn't know. I would write out the terms, write out their definitions, and then I would just read through the list to myself like several times a day, saying them out loud so that I could hear them. And I didn't read the list in the same order every time, because if you just read it like top to bottom every single time you read it, then you're just going to get used to hearing those things in order, and it's going to be much more difficult for you to pull them out of your brain. So I would read them top to bottom, bottom to top, randomly, until I heard it enough times that I thought that I understood the meanings. And then what I would do is I would just read the term and like look up away from the page and see if I could recite what the definition was. And I just did that probably for a week straight before my test, and that helped me immensely, knowing what those terms were. And even if you can't say word for word what the definition is, if you have a pretty good idea of how one term differs from a similar term, then that's gonna help you on the MCAT. So this is what I did wrong. I did things very, very wrong for the MCAT towards the end. I let studying for that test consume my entire life. And it's okay that you take it really, really seriously, because you should. It's one of the really important determining factors that will help you get into medical school. But just know that it's not the most important thing in your life. The most important thing is being healthy and being able to take care of yourself. And that gets really difficult when you're spending every waking moment thinking about how much you have to study, how many things you have to learn, and how important the test is. And I really let that take over my life. And what I did was I stopped going to the gym, I stopped eating well, I didn't give myself any free time, I stopped seeing my friends, I just spent every waking moment that I wasn't at work studying. I would get up at 4:30 or 5 and study straight until I had to leave for work, didn't eat breakfast, went to work for 8-9 hours, drove home, and then I would study again until I went to sleep. I might have a snack here or there when I decided I was gonna take a break from studying, but I completely burned myself out after a month or so of doing this. I didn't allow myself to go do anything fun. I thought that it was more important for me to take every bit of free time that I had away from work to study. This was really easy to think because I live pretty far away from work. It takes me about 40 minutes to drive there. So if I spend 40 minutes driving to work and then 8.5-9 hours at work and 40 minutes back, that doesn't give me a whole lot of time during the day to actually study. And so what I thought was like, okay, I need to maximize the hours that I'm awake and spend when I'm not at work studying. And that's good to a certain degree, but when you feel yourself burning out and getting tired, you need to give yourself a break. Your brain is not gonna work properly if you don't give yourself time to just not think about anything, or go do something fun, go do something that you enjoy. I stopped going to the gym, which is something that's really, really important to me, and I just stopped going, and my mental health went like straight down the tube when I decided to stop going to the gym, because I felt like it was more productive for me to study. But what I failed to recognize is how important exercise is for your body and your brain, like your whole health in general. And especially since I stopped eating very well, and I wasn't going to the gym, my health, not just my mental health, my physical health just like went down the tubes. It was terrible. And so I didn't feel good, I wasn't thinking well, and I was so burnt out that I was having mental breakdowns like every other day. And that does not make for a very good study environment. It doesn't make for a very good relationship that you have with studying or with the exam, and it makes it really, really hard to put anything else into your brain when you're just sitting at your desk thinking about how unhappy you are. Something else that I obsessed over was how many points I was getting, what my score was on my practice test, rather than seeing trends. Your first practice test is usually going to be a pretty low score just because you've never sat for that long to take a test before, or you've never tried to answer questions like the MCAT asks you questions. And I would obsess over my score. I would only think about how my scores weren't my goal score yet, and I wasn't recognizing that between my first and second practice test, or my second and third practice test, that I was trending upwards. I was doing better on every section and my score was going up. But instead of recognizing that as progress, I would say, oh, this still isn't my goal score. Like, how am I gonna do well on this test if I can't even get the score that I want on a practice test? And I would obsess over that and not recognize the progress I was making, and it made me feel stupid. It made me feel worthless, like I wasn't gonna do well on the test. I wanted to cancel my test so many times, and I'm so glad I didn't because I ended up doing well. But these are things that I did that please do not do these things. It makes it so much more miserable trying to study, and it makes it feel like you're not gonna do well as a doctor. Man, it just sucked. Like, it just sucked a lot. If I could do anything differently with the way that I studied for the test, I would be so much kinder to myself. I would be healthier, and I would just focus on progress in any form rather than looking at scores alone. It's so important to take time away from studying to do something relaxing or do something fun, do things you enjoy, see your friends, see your boyfriend or girlfriend or significant other or anything. Go to the gym, be healthy, get exercise, do something that's not sitting at your desk and studying. I wish someone had pounded that into my head when I was studying, because I became so burnt out. It took me months to recover. Months. Like, I don't think you understand. It took me months to recover from this exam. I didn't feel like myself forever. I had to completely recover from the damage I did to my body, the damage I did to my brain, and the way that I was thinking about myself and about medical school. It took me forever to get back to normal, and that's not how it's supposed to be. So please do not study like I did. Do not treat yourself the way that I did, because I want you all to be healthy and happy and, you know, do well on your MCAT, on your other tests, and in medical school. Like, just remember that the most important thing is your health, not your studying, not your test scores, not your course grades or anything. The most important thing is being healthy, and if you are healthy, you're gonna have a better chance of doing well on your exams and doing well in class and doing well in med school and on your MCAT and everything. So put yourself first. Don't put studying first, because studying will always be there. The materials will always be there waiting for you when you get home from doing your fun things. And obviously you want to be disciplined. You want to make the time to study well and do well. But when the time comes that you need a break, take the break. Just take it. Take the break, because that's way more important than forcing one more flashcard into your head, because you're probably not going to remember it anyway if you're that tired and that burnt out. So here are some little facts about the MCAT that I learned that I felt like were really, really helpful. On average, people will do 2 to 3 test points better on the actual exam than they will on their practice test. From what I understood, the practice tests are meant to be a little bit harder and scored a little bit harsher than the real exam to try and get you used to taking a really hard test. And if you can do well on the practice tests that are meant to be harder than the real exam, then when you take the real exam, you're gonna feel much more confident, you're gonna do better, and it makes it easier for you to feel confident on the real exam. So that's something to keep in mind when you're studying. Obviously, you wanna try as hard as you can to do as well as you can on the practice test, but understand that they're supposed to be scored and written a little bit harder than the real exam is going to be. Your score on the exam is based on how everybody else does, not particularly on how many questions you get right. It's scored on a curve, so your score is based on how everybody else who took your version of the test did. What helped me to remember is that there are some people who go in and take the MCAT for fun without studying just to see how well they're gonna do. As long as you adequately prepare, as long as you do the best that you can to prepare for the exam and to do well, you're gonna be rewarded, most likely, with a pretty good score. Something else that really helped me was that the test is written so that one section is gonna be disproportionately more difficult than the rest of the sections. And for me, that was the chem physics section at the very, very beginning of the test. I remember opening my test and the very first question, I was like, I have no idea how to answer this. And I remembered that there's always gonna be one section that's way harder than the other ones. They do that on purpose to throw you off, to see if you're gonna recover for the rest of the exam. And so I just bucked up and realized that this section was gonna be difficult and I just needed to try my hardest because that section was probably gonna be difficult for everybody. And so it was going to be scored probably a little bit less harshly because it was so difficult. Something else that's good to remember is there are going to be questions in every section that are called field questions. And these questions are difficult, and the test makers are trying to see if this question is too difficult to put on a test. They aren't counted towards your final score. They're just seeing how many people are going to get the question right so that they can determine whether they're actually going to make it a scored question on a different version of the MCAT. Now, to be fair, there are going to be very, very difficult questions that are scored, and you need to treat every single question like it is going to go towards your final score because you don't know which are field questions and which aren't. It just helped me to remember that field questions exist and not every question is going to go towards your final score, and it's most likely going to be those really, really difficult questions. There's one last thing that I am going to try to impart on you. If you learn nothing from this video except for this point, then I was successful. Please stay off of Reddit, stay off of Student Doctor Network. There are going to be people on the internet who just do better than you do, and that's okay. But there are also people on the internet who are gonna say that they did really well, and they can say whatever they want because it's not regulated. People can lie on the internet, and seeing all of these people saying, oh, like, I got a 517, I got a 523, or whatever, is gonna make you feel so bad if you didn't get a score like that. It's okay to not get the 99th percentile score because hardly anyone does that well. And that's okay. I'm pretty sure the average accepted medical student MCAT score is a 509. You don't need to get a 515, a 520, a 525 to get into medical school. You just need to do the best that you possibly can and worry about your score and worry about your journey and yourself. How other people score on things is not as important as how you score on things and how you feel about the way that you score on things. So stay off the internet, stay off of Reddit and Student Doctor Network. It's just gonna bring you down. It's just gonna make you sad. And I did my best to stay off of these websites. Cole did not. He drove himself crazy comparing himself to people on the internet. And when you compare yourself to other people, you're always going to lose. Yeah, that's all I have. So if you have any other questions about my MCAT experience, what I did to prepare, or if you feel like I left something out that you really want to learn about, or you feel like it's important for me to talk about, please leave it down in the comments. I would love to make another video or to answer your comments giving you the answers to the questions that you have. So thank you for coming back. I know it's been a while, but happy holidays, happy 2020, and I'll see you next time.